Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to this week's episode, number 125 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I am so thrilled you are here. And today we're going to focus on something that so many consultants, and you may be one of them, so many consultants that I talk to want to transition out of hourly based billing, but they get stuck. They get stuck and they're not sure how to do it. They're afraid that they're going to lose money. They're afraid they're going to end up working unpaid hours. And you may be in that same boat where you know you would like to transition out of time-based billing or simply explore transitioning out of hourly based or time-based billing, but haven't been able to yet make the leap. And today I want to help you to make that leap. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. I'm going to dive into each of those 5 steps and help you to start implementing this process for yourself so you can move into other types of billing that aren't so restrictive. Before we do that, though, I just have to share with you that this weekend, it's 5 a.m. I'm recording this because later today we are leaving for the state swim meet. My 2 older sons, this is the culmination. I've been sharing with you all summer. We've been at the pool. It's year-round swimming, but all summer long they've been swimming and going to different meets all over the region. And the 2 oldest qualified for the state swim meet. And my oldest son, who's 12, he is at the top of his age bracket and ranked 3rd in the state for several events, which is a really big deal. He's been working on this for 5 years, and there's so many parallels that I'm often finding between the mental side of swimming and what we talk about here on the podcast. 5 years of working so hard, and here we are, and it's all going to come down. Honestly, he's very prepared from a physical perspective, but is all going to come down to the mental side. And that's where I've always am thinking about the parallels to running a business like ours, a consulting business, and how I know you have the skills to, I hear from you. If you're like most consultants, I feel really comfortable implementing for my clients. I feel really comfortable once I sign a contract, but it's getting to that space that feels so challenging and, hard to do. And so much of that is a mental side of running your business. And that's what I think about for my son, the oldest, especially. The middle one is a little bit newer to the sport and excited for his first state meet. But anyway, that mental part of the game is so important. And that's the same thing for us as consultants and independent consulting business owners. And oftentimes it's overlooked. And so that's why I love focusing on that for you in this podcast, because that is what makes the difference. So I'll let you know how it goes. I feel really excited and proud and also nervous for him already. So let's dive into today's episode, which is the 5 steps to transition out of time-based billing. So our agenda today is super simple. I'm going to share with you a couple of tools that are complementary companions to today's episode to help you implement it. We're going to go over each of the 5 steps to transition out of hourly based billing or time-based billing. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with a very specific action plan for you, which involves putting these steps into place, but a few more things in addition to that to really help get you going. So be sure to stay to the end. Okay, so let's dive in. Step number 1. If you've been listening to this podcast for any period of time, you may be not surprised. So when I say to you, step number 1 is to get really clear. Get really clear on your intention. Why are you wanting to transition out of hourly based or time based billing? A lot of times I hear from consultants when I ask them this question is they say things like, I don't want to be billing based on hours or based on time. I want to shift my pricing to value based pricing. And I ask why, and they say it's better. It's better, or I read this thing, or someone told me, or Melissa, I heard on episode number whatever, I should do that. And it seems like it's the next best step to advance my business. It's very vague, very vague. Whatever's going on in your mind, check it for yourself to figure out, is it vague like that? That's a very common response. I know that it's better. I know I should transition into value based pricing. And that is not going to get you where you want to go. You want to be very clear on why you want to make this change, because it is a change. And change is going to require new ways of thinking. Change is going to require you to look at things differently than you have been looking at them before. That's what's creating you charging on a time-based scenario, is the way you're thinking about yourself, what you do, and the way you're thinking about your clients and the way they think about what you do. And so if you're not really clear on why you're doing this, it's kind of like a house of cards. It's going to fall apart, because we're trying to create a lasting change here. And lasting change requires some level of thinking here, a deeper level of thinking, so that you can always go back to it and remind yourself when things get scary, that when things get dicey, when things feel unsure or unclear or uncertain, as they will in this process of changing your pricing model. So you want to get very specific about what is the outcome you're trying to achieve. Some examples here are, for me, when I started transitioning out of hourly based billing, one of the primary reasons for doing so was to protect myself from the temptation to work. You may relate to this. On an day by day basis, on an hour by hour basis, you're almost having to decide, am I going to make $225 right now? Am I going to make $200 right now? Am I going to make $250 right now? Whatever your bill rate is. Or am I going to fill in the blank, sit by the pool, take my child to the zoo, go on that vacation, take that bike trip through Europe that I've been wanting to do, whatever it is. Constantly making these thought processes, especially on an hour by hour basis. Am I going to do this thing, or am I going to make $250 or whatever your bill rate is? What is the specific outcome you want to achieve by shifting your pricing model? For me, it was that, and I know talking with and working with so many independent consultants, it's so common that the goal can simply be to protect yourself from the temptation to work. Another specific outcome you might want to achieve is to shift the client perception away from you being an extra pair of hands, or you being more of a staff augmentation type of a person, into seeing you as the expert that you are, to seeing you as the advisor that you are, the trusted advisor that you are. Those are some examples of what that specific outcome is that you want to achieve. It may be even more specific than that. I want to increase my revenue by X, Y, or Z, and I cannot do that because I don't have any more hours in the day or the month to work. And so, in order to increase my revenue by whatever the number is, without building a large team, this is what needs to happen for my business, for me to make more of each hour that I have in the day for client delivery, for example. So get very clear on your intention. It could be all of those. Likely it's some form or fashion of all of those examples I just gave you. For me, the driving factor is I've got to make a change. I've got to protect myself from this temptation to work. I think it was born out of, just as an aside, that temptation for me was born out of early days at Accenture, where they highly, highly encourage you to bill as many hours as possible, get as much done as possible, stay as late as possible, and get bill the hours. And when I was 22 years old, that was great, but not anymore. So for you, it may be something similar as well. Okay, so that was step number one, get clear on your intention. Step number two, sell yourself on this process, sell yourself on this transition out of hourly based billing or time based billing into your alternative pricing model. And I made it step two because it's really important, but truly it's a step that you'll want to do each step of the way. This is not kind of a step two, check the box and move on. This is something that you're going to want to continuously do for yourself. And I'll show you where that shows up later here in a moment. But step two is to start selling yourself. We'll call it that way. Start selling yourself on this process of whatever your intention is of moving out of hourly based or time based billing. Start to ask yourself, what has held me back from making this move before? What about this transition seems hard or scary? And get very specific with yourself. If you don't sell yourself first, it's going to be very, very hard for you to sell a client on I'll call it an alternative based pricing model, a non time based pricing model. We'll talk about what the alternatives are here in a second, but it's going to be really difficult for you to sell anything if you're not sold yourself first. It is not your client's job, to fill in your gaps in confidence, your gaps in belief about this model as one that it sets both you and the client up for the greatest amount of success. So you want to sell yourself first in order to come at this confidently, in order to understand where you might be a little bit shaky and need to reinforce and to see how this alternative is a benefit to both you and to the client. So to sell yourself on this process of transitioning from time-based billing into an alternative model, you want to pinpoint exactly where you are not yet sold in your own mind. So ask yourself those questions I just gave you. What about this transition seems hard? What about this transition seems scary? What's held me back from making this move before now? What do I think the client is thinking about a non-time based pricing model? That's the best question. What do I think the client could be thinking about an alternative pricing model? Whatever you're moving to, we'll just use value-based pricing. Value-based pricing or fixed-based pricing. What do you think the client is thinking about that pricing model or a retainer? What are they thinking? The reason why I give you that question to ask and answer for yourself is because it is a reflection of what you are thinking. When you think the client doesn't want to pay in this way, the client won't be on board, my potential clients, that's just not how they operate. My potential clients, is just how they're used to doing business. All of those things are your own highlight where you're shaky on this, alternative pricing model being the best choice for you and your business and for your clients. And so get very specific in asking and answering those questions that I just gave you. Some other examples might be, I'm afraid that I'm going to lose money. I'm afraid that I'm going to price out something in a fixed price model or a value based price model or a success based price model or a retainer based price model. I'm afraid I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to undercut myself, underestimate, and then I'm going to end up working for free. I'm going to end up working unpaid. That is a very common concern. Another example of, what you might get out of this process of asking yourself what's holding you back is, I won't be good at selling this. I can sell hourly. I've done that. I'm not going to be good at figuring out how to get all the data points and information I need and background I need in order to price this out. It's just so much easier to sell hourly or time-based pricing. It doesn't slow down the sales process so much. Those are great things to know that you're thinking so that then you can start to replace them, to put in alternative ways of thinking that will move you forward toward selling based on alternate non-time based pricing models. So, first, you're going to pinpoint all of those areas that are holding you back from moving forward or have been historically holding you back. And what are your thought processes in general about selling a non time based pricing model? Again, we're talking about retainers, we're talking about fixed price models, we're talking about value based pricing models, and ultimately success based pricing models. And I don't want to say ultimately in that that's kind of the pinnacle, but that's another pricing model that you can consider, although that one is the most advanced out of all of those choices. Okay, so you're going to pinpoint what's holding you back or where you're not fully sold on yourself. And then one by one, you're going to find the alternative, the CEO level thought process that you can use to transition into a new way of thinking about your pricing, a new way of thinking about the way you're selling, a new way of thinking about the way you're doing business, a new way of thinking about what benefits your clients and what your clients are will be excited to accept, willing and excited to accept in terms of your pricing models. So, a few examples here. Let's say that you're thinking something like, I don't want to lose money. I'm worried that this type of pricing model will set me up ultimately to do unpaid work in some way. The shift here could be something such as, I can figure this out in a way where I don't lose money. It's possible that I can figure out how to price my engagements in a way that is more profitable. Do you see the shift in thinking? One is fear based. I don't want to lose money. This isn't going to make sense for me. This doesn't work for my type of client. This doesn't work for my type of the work that I do. This doesn't work for me. I'm not capable of selling in a different way. Those are all fear based. When you shift into a CEO type thinking, I can figure out how to price this in a way where I don't lose money. Do you see how it opens up the possibility for you? It starts to knock down some of that fear and starts to help you to think about, I can figure this out. It is solvable. Another example. Let's say you're thinking the client won't agree to this pricing, this an alternative non-time based pricing structure. The alternative CEO level thinking to that is, well, I can help the client to see how this is beneficial to them, or this is a better way. Again, do you see where the initial way you might be thinking about this is not how my kind of client operates? I hear that all the time. My type of client is different, which is ironic, right? You hear that all the time too from your clients. We're different. We're different. Well, guess what? You're not different. Your types of clients are not different. I've seen it in all types of industries, both helping independent consultants through my coaching practice right now, in the real time here, but also in my past where I was, one of the executives in charge of building a software system that managed external contractors and consultants, data from all over the world, from all different types of industries, ranging from nursing assistants to oil workers in the oil sands region of Canada to IT workers in India and in the US, all types of workers. And I could tell you that there are not types of clients or types of nature of work that are doing that are hard and fast fixed. It has to be time based. If you think it's hard and fast, fixed time based, you're keeping yourself in a box versus shifting into it's possible the client will see how this is beneficial. It's possible the client is open to seeing how non time based billing is beneficial. Right. So, those give you a few examples here of how to sell yourself. You want to pinpoint where you are not sold, and then you want to find alternative ways of thinking about your pricing from a CEO mindset so that you can move forward and start shifting those blockers, self imposed blockers, into more highly productive ways of thinking that will move you forward. So that is the second step. Sell yourself. So first we're getting clear on what is your intention? Why are you moving from your time-based billing into an alternative pricing model? And I've shared with you a lot of examples of what those could be. And then you're going to sell yourself. And then thirdly, you're going to define what that alternative pricing model is. What is the alternative pricing model that you believe will best align your business goals with your client's desired outcomes? So I've shared with you already some of those options, right? Could be fixed fee. That could be the next step for you, moving out of our time-based billing into some form of a fixed fee, or into value-based pricing, or into retainer-based pricing, or into success based pricing. The difference between value based pricing and success based pricing is probably for a different episode, but very briefly, value based pricing is based on a pricing model or formula based on the outcomes, both tangible and intangible, the client will experience as a result of your work with them. And success based is where you're calculating some percentage of, if you save $1 million, I'll get 10% of that. Or if you, increase revenue by $1 million, I'll get 10% of that. That's simply the difference there. But you're going to want to choose that alternative pricing model and then start asking yourself, how am I going to operationalize this? So you've already started doing the work to sell yourself. And now you're going to start doing the work to operationalize what this pricing model will look like. So you're choosing what is that alternative pricing model, and then what needs to change about your business development process. A lot of times we don't think about this as early as we need to, in our business development process. But I would encourage you to think about, does there need to be a shift in the types of clients that I'm attracting right now or that I've got in my pipeline right now? Is there something different or unique or additive about what my typical client looks like in my pipeline? Is there something that I want to shift about that ideal client profile to better support an alternative pricing model? So let me give you an example. You might decide, I'm going to move into value based pricing and I'm going to start with doing that in more strategy type work. Right now, I've been doing more implementation type work, and I want to move into more strategy, kind of faster, shorter engagements, more strategic engagements. And so there may need to be a slight shift in your lead gen processes to support the type of work you want to be doing and the pricing model that goes with that. The other thing that you may want to consider changing about your business development process is the criteria by which you're qualifying a potential client. Think about, what are the things that you do now to qualify a potential client, and does that need to shift? Ask yourself, what questions do you need to be asking in your sales process, in your discovery process, so that you can collect all of the data points needed to build out your new pricing. There will likely be different types of questions that you're asking, going deeper on what they want and why they want it, and what the outcome is that they anticipate, and how they quantify that and think about that themselves. What kinds of questions do you need to add to your sales process to make sure that you've got those data points required to support your new pricing model? And you can go back to episode 107, where I talk more about some very specific discovery questions you could be asking. You may identify another shift in your business development process, which is really going from more of an interview style where you might be interviewing them a little bit, they're interviewing you. It feels a little bit more like a full-time interview for a consulting engagement. They're asking you about your past experience, how it relates to the project that they want to do. You may identify that you want to shift that into more of a true consulting sales process where you're leading the process, you're running through discovery, they're experiencing your expertise through the way you're managing the process versus them asking you interview type styles. You may identify that you've got to adjust your sales process so that it is more of a consultant led process and helps you to get all the data points you need to build out your pricing options. So this gives you some really good examples of defining and operationalizing your alternative pricing model. And I will repeat to you that part of this step also is selling yourself as you go. That's why I put sell yourself so early on here, is that you're going to want to continue selling yourself after step two and throughout this process. So, to recap step three, you're going to define that new pricing model, the alternative to time based billing. So, what is it? What types of services in your service portfolio does it apply to? And then, what changes do you need to make? Do you identify that you want to make in your business development process in order to support that new pricing model? Before I move on from number three, though, I do want to point out one thing. I said new pricing model. I've been saying that here and there throughout this episode. What you're doing here with adding a non time based pricing model into your business, it doesn't mean that you have to stop entirely pricing things on an hourly basis. We're just opening up the door for you to start pricing some of your services in a non time based way. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And I think that's so important as you're thinking about this. We're not just leaping into something brand new. We're thinking about, okay, I'm going to add non time based pricing into my practice. And then from there, you may choose to make that 100% of the time, or you may choose to use non time based pricing for some services versus for others. So, again, just thinking about this in a way that isn't so black or white, or we're really thinking about it in terms of, I am going to have this alternative pricing model for these types of services to start off with. Let's not make it so big. Okay, so step number four. We've gone through step number one, two, three. One is get clear on your intention. Why are you doing this? Number two is to incorporate selling yourself on this process throughout the work that you're doing here to shift your pricing models. Number three is to define much more clearly, what is this alternative pricing model that I'm implementing? What is it? What does it apply to? And how does it impact my entire really life cycle of business development and even delivery? Then step number four, choose a proof of concept. Again, we're not just making a wholesale change to your business yet. You may choose to do so in the future, but right now, in order to transition out of non time based billing, let's just pick a proof of concept. Let's pick something small to start with. That can also help take the temperature down on making this change where it doesn't feel so big. And quite frankly, I know that you would likely advise your clients to do the same thing. A lot of times we advise our clients to do something and we completely forget about doing it for ourselves. It's that amnesia we've talked about here before. So think about, what could a proof of concept be? Is there something in your pipeline right now where you could start experimenting with a non time based pricing model? Or is there something that you want to seek for your pipeline? Go out and intentionally create for your pipeline that really fits well into a non time based pricing model. And then use that process to ask yourself, as you look at whatever's in your pipeline, and you might have an immediate reaction, well, not this one, or I need a different thing. Ask yourself, why not? Why not this one? Shift it from this one, it won't work, to let me figure out why this one will work. Just change the baseline assumption. Everything in your pipeline will work for a non time based pricing alternative. How could I make it work? Versus this won't work. Let me talk myself into why it would work. You see the difference? So choose a proof of concept. You may have something in your pipeline, or you may not have something in your pipeline. If you don't have something in your pipeline, that could very likely be the case for you if you're working on a time based type of an engagement. A lot of times we work on one or maybe two, and that uses up all of our capacity. And it might be that you've got a contract for the foreseeable future. You might not have anything in your pipeline, and you may have very little capacity, but start thinking about, what could I go out? What types of potential clients could I start engaging with where I could work on this process to sell them a non time based engagement that's more strategy work, for example, that could take me a couple of hours a week, that could fit in with my current capacity, and where I could test out this ability to create leads for this type of work, to sell this type of work, and make it where it's lower pressure because you've already got a client that is taking up most of your time. That's another great way to do this. So, that gives you some examples about how to choose your proof of concept. I would recommend don't wait. Don't wait until you feel that you have more time on your hands and you could tackle this. Do it now. Go out and find a client that takes a couple of hours a week. For example, if you're fully utilized right now, and start testing this out so that when you do start opening up for more capacity, you've got that experience under your belt already and you don't feel trapped into taking another time based engagement because you're worried about cash flow. Okay. And then the fifth and final step is to implement your new pricing model with that proof of concept and treat it as an experiment. Implement it, iterate, and adjust. So many of us are worried about making mistakes. I don't want to make a mistake. I'm worried that I'll get myself trapped into something that's not profitable. I'm worried that I'm going to set myself up in a way that's not successful. Instead of worrying about making mistakes, think about this from an experimental mindset where you've set yourself up as best as you can for success. You've added in protections for your business as the way you've priced out this new engagement. But even then, even if you have everything buttoned down or you've even done this 10 or 15 times, you're going to make mistakes. So recognize that there's nothing wrong with you. In fact, if you're not making mistakes, I would say that you're probably playing too small. So anticipate that you're going to make mistakes. That's why you want to choose a kind of a smaller, easier to define proof of concept, and then implement that process of setting up your hypothesis. This is what I expect out of this engagement. This is the pricing. This is what I think my expectation of what it will take me to deliver, and tracking what it actually takes you to deliver so that then you can really get some great data points and implement a process of continuous improvement. Continuous improvement, both from a process perspective and from a mindset perspective, so that ultimately you're very solid on how you sell your engagements moving forward, how you price those engagements in a non-time based way for those types of services that you want to price in a non-time based way, and how you've sold yourself on that type of pricing, and ultimately on the value that your clients experience from it. So those are the 5 steps. I'll repeat them for you, and then I'm going to give you a very specific action plan. Number 1, get clear on your intentions. Why are you wanting to move out of time-based billing, and what does success look like? Then you're going to want to start your process of selling yourself, which starts there and goes through really throughout your business. That is its own process I could do a whole episode on. Sell yourself on shifting or adding non-time based billing into your practice, your consulting practice. Then number 3, you're going to want to get really clear on your alternative pricing model and process. What does it look like for business development? And then choose a proof of concept, and then iterate and adjust, and know that you will make mistakes and be okay with that. Create that culture for yourself of continuous improvement. So, to put this episode into action, first of all, go take the IC pricing assessment, independent consultants pricing assessment, that will help you to uncover other areas where you may be having blockers around implementing non-time based billing structures. So that's at the letters IC for independent consultant, icpricing.com. Then you want to go read the consulting rates and retainers mega tutorial. We'll put the link to the show notes. There's some more in-depth resource for you there on non-time based billing structures. And then choose that proof of concept. Choose something from your pipeline, or go build something into your pipeline so you can start experimenting and testing with alternative pricing models. And then finally, implement those 5 steps we talked about today. All right, my friend, thanks for tuning in today. Hopefully, that gives you a really clear roadmap to transition out of hourly based billing. And I will see you again next week. Take care. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.